Well, this past weekend, 7 of our confirmation students went to the Cathedral Basilica in St. Louis, the center of the Archdiocese of Roman Catholicism in St. Louis. This was part of our whirlwind tour of faith institutions, an annual pilgrimage that all of our Bem Church confirmation students partake to prepare themselves for being confirmed, adequately analyzing their own faith by learning more about the faith of others. We have some people here who have taken this faith journeys trip before. Who's been on this? I know Faye has been, Dorothea's been, of course Lindsay and Kim were just on it, and many others. Laura has been on it with us as well. Many folks have taken this trip with us. The Cathedral Basilica, you'll remember, is an amazing place. It's really 2 buildings in one, as the girls were talking about. The exterior is a Gothic style, a Gothic shell, while the interior is Byzantine. The interior is like a separate building constructed inside the outer shell. Even the domes of the interior are not really the underside of the domes you see on the outside. There's a full story in between them. The architectural style is designed with faith in mind. The Gothic style of the exterior points towards the heavens, drawing your eye towards God, while the Byzantine style of the interior draws heaven down towards the people, bringing an essence of the holy into those interior spaces. Not that God is really up, but you know the idea there. Perhaps the most inspiring part of the Cathedral Basilica, however, are the mosaics. Every square inch of the multifaceted ceiling and the walls are covered in mosaics. These mosaics are tiny colored tiles that are pieced together to form an image. The narthex is covered with 10 scenes from the life of St. Louis IX, the King of France from 1226 to 1270, the patron saint of the city of St. Louis and the patron saint of that cathedral. The cathedral is named after that saint, and the narthex is a tribute to his life and times. These tiny mosaic tiles construct a diorama of how God is still speaking through this great saint of the church, and why the church chose to canonize him. When you enter the sanctuary, the historic dome is 96 feet above your head. And this dome contains scenes about the history of St. Louis and the Roman Catholic fathers and mothers who helped develop the ecclesiastical, the scholastic, and the health services of St. Louis City. There are mosaics depicting Cardinal Glennon, Cardinal Carberry, Bishop de Burgh, the Sisters of St. Mary who founded St. Mary's Hospitals, and others. All depictions are made in tiny, less than 1-inch pieces of colored ceramic. Moving into the central dome, we find ourselves 143 feet beneath this beautiful expanse of space. The dome contains mosaics featuring God and creation, Christ the Savior, and the Holy Spirit. There are mosaics depicting Elijah receiving instructions from God, or Elijah ascending to heaven in a chariot of fire, Ezekiel receiving instruction from God, depictions of angels, messengers, bringing us the wisdom of God through scriptures and tradition, and other scenes of faith. There's an east transept dome with mosaics representing Jesus' life, the Last Supper, and other aspects of Jesus' ministry with us, and a west transept dome with depictions of Pentecost and Christ's ascension to heaven. All of them done with little tiny pieces of ceramic, colored pieces joined together to form one larger image of faith. Equally as compelling to us was our first stop on our trip, the Assumption Greek Orthodox Church in West St. Louis County. This Greek Orthodox Church is covered, the ceiling and the walls and everything, with visual representation of faith as well. But their visual representations are not mosaic, they're icons. Icons are visual representations of faith, like pictures, but living faith pictures that represent the faith in incredible ways. Like the Basilica, the Greek Orthodox Church has every square inch covered with something, and the icons on their walls are painted in Greece by iconographers on large sheets of canvas, and then they're rolled up and sent here and applied to the ceilings and the walls of the church. You can imagine maintenance of these icons is an ongoing investment of time, talent, treasure, and heart. But the iconography is especially designed to enhance your faith through visual imagery. Iconography is more than just pretty pictures. Icons are intentional representations of faith with symbolism and perspective that you don't find in Renaissance paintings. Icons are not intended to be historical, and they're not intended to be an accurate photographic representation of a person or an event. For instance, the icon of John the Baptizer has John standing by the Jordan with his camel's hair coat and his belt and his rough staff made of wood, but the icon also has John's head on a platter at his feet, representing the beheading that would be John's ultimate demise. So there are two heads in that icon, one on his shoulders and one on the ground, but it's an expression of faith. It's not a historical rendition. Viewing an icon, like reading the Bible, is not supposed to tell you what happened historically. It's supposed to tell you about your faith and to get you to connect more closely to your faith and God's presence in the world. It's not supposed to necessarily tell you, but draw you in. Their icon at the Last Supper, as the girls talked about, is a great way to understand this. If you look at Michelangelo's painting, like we have hanging in our sofa room, it looks like we're watching this scene through a window or maybe on TV. We see a rectangular table with Jesus and the disciples sitting on the other side, conversing amongst themselves. We're not there, we're just kind of watching it. The icon of the Last Supper at the Greek Orthodox Church is different than that, however. This icon features a football-shaped table, not quite round, but more oval, with Jesus and the disciples on one side of it, but there are place settings on the other side, and the perspective of the painting draws you into it. If you stand just 4 feet in front of that icon, it feels like you too are sitting at the table with the disciples. They place this icon right behind their communion table, so when the congregation comes forward for communion, they feel that they are sharing communion with Jesus and his friends. There are 2 series of images on the ceiling of the Greek Orthodox Church. One series represents Mary's life, the other is a representation of Jesus' life. There are scenes on both of them that are extra biblical that tell about the essential characters of our faith through iconography. They have other icons, Old Testament and New Testament, and so on. There's one thing that is both, well, there are many things, but one thing that struck me that is both at the Basilica and at the Greek Orthodox Church. Both represent a story of Pentecost. They both have different representations of the Pentecost story that really cause you to stop and think. The sensory input on this trip is a bit overwhelming. There's a phrase that was used by our tour guide at the Greek Orthodox Church that struck me about the religious importance of both of these places, their images and icons in the faith journey of our confirmands. The guide at the Greek Orthodox Church was telling us about iconographers, the people who paint these icons. And they have to be specially trained in the ways of iconography, as there is so much symbolic representation in each one. Iconographers train for years to paint and maintain these icons, and that is their ministry. It's their sole focus in life. She said they are trained in the visual vocabulary of the Greek Orthodox Church, so they can employ that visual vocabulary in their expressions of faith. Think about that phrase for a moment. Visual vocabulary. The way they paint their faith as a visual representation, just as the mosaic workers at the Basilica do, are monumental. They bring our shared faith to life in a way that just the words on a page may not do so alone. They look for new and artistic ways to reveal the truths of hope and salvation and achieve great testimony through their artistic representation. Visual vocabulary. The Bible is read on the ceiling of these churches. I could read you the story. Alan read us the story. But showing you the story enhanced is so much more provocative and really causes you to think. Causes you to think about faith. Now, I don't know if Jesus ever picked up a paintbrush to visually represent his faith, or pieced together broken pieces of pottery to form a mosaic about his faith or his understanding of God's universal truth of justice for all. We do know that Jesus drew pictures in the sand. We see that in John chapter 8, verse 7, when the gathered crowd wants to stone the woman. and Jesus is drawing in the sand, was it a representation of his faith he was drawing, or just a 3D cube doodled out of boredom? We don't know. But even if he didn't paint pictures to represent his words, we do know that he painted pictures of his faith using words. Through story and parable, Jesus represented his faith in a way that seemed familiar to him and to his crowd, painting a picture of our shared faith using the words of parable. Today's gospel lesson contains 3 pictures painted by Jesus. And as he shares his faith with us, we see this story that he paints in our minds. Now I'm going to tell you something dangerous to do during a sermon. I'm going to invite you to close your eyes. Close your eyes for a minute. Close your eyes and let's see if we can picture this. Picture this painting that Jesus is creating with words. Embrace the iconography of the word art that Jesus reveals today. The kingdom of heaven is a field of wheat blowing in the wind. But look, an enemy has come and sowed weeds among the wheat. The plants grow up and the weeds appear as well. This is the kingdom of heaven. Another image. The kingdom of heaven is a mustard seed dropped into the ground, planted with care. The mustard seed is the smallest of all seeds, yet it grows into the greatest shrub and even a tree. Even birds of the air come and find comfort and security in the branches of the tree that came from that seed. Another image. The kingdom of heaven is the yeast that is mixed in with the flour that is used to make bread. As a woman is making bread, she mixes in the yeast to corrupt the flour and cause it to rise. This is the kingdom of heaven. Okay, you can open your eyes now. Is everybody's eyes open? Okay, just want to make sure. What did you see when you hear those words? The images that Jesus painted with his words are like the images that the iconographers or the mosaic artists create to represent universal truths, the realities of God's kingdom. Through word pictures, Jesus shares the faith with us, and our minds are open to exploring the kingdom of heaven in new and exciting ways. Jesus' parables are not designed to bluntly tell it like it is. Jesus' parables are designed so that we can open our minds and think, that we can picture things, that we can be open to new ways of understanding, new ways of thinking, that we might expand our thoughts and our minds so that we can encompass Jesus in a whole new way of looking at the world. Of course, we don't get it, and neither did the disciples. We want the parables explained to us. Tell us bluntly, tell us truthfully, give us just the facts. What's the kingdom of heaven like? What do we got to do? Give us a checklist. The disciples were the same way. If we read on in Matthew's gospel, after where we stopped today, verses 36 through 42, they insist that Jesus explain the parables that he just told them. And he does. But many biblical scholars believe that that section of Matthew is actually Matthew's interpretation rather than Jesus' interpretation. They believe that Jesus didn't actually say those words, but Matthew put that in there to explain what Jesus was talking about. I don't know if that's true or not, but I can see some truth to that assumption, because Jesus really didn't explain things. Jesus talked about things in parable because he wanted us to think. And that is the purpose of speaking in parables. Jesus wasn't interested in giving us all the answers. Think about what would happen in school if your rabbi, your teacher, gave you all the answers. Would you get any closer to understanding if your teacher gave you all the answers? Would you get any closer to understanding the subject at hand? Would you learn anything about science without hypothesis, collecting data, experimentation, and then coming to a conclusion? Would you learn anything about systemic process if your math teacher just gave you all the answers? I hear students complain all the time about math and science, saying that there's no practical application for this in my life. Where in life will I ever have to do algebra, calculus, or trigonometry? Where in my life will I ever have to employ the scientific method? The reality is, we use these skills every day without realizing it, because math and science and other disciplines as well are not designed to tell us what the answers are. They're designed to teach us how to think. Jesus wasn't interested in giving us all the answers. Jesus was interested in teaching us how to think. And that's why Jesus spoke in parables. So when we approach these parables, let us not look for easy answers and allegories. I kind of did that in the children's time, but I tried to resist, because it's hard to resist, right? We like to assign this role to the wheat, and this role to the weeds, and this role to the mustard seed, and this role to the birds that make nests in the trees. These parables are not allegories, even though Matthew tries to turn it into one. These parables are beautiful pictures painted by Jesus to inspire us to think about our faith, our life, our connection to God, and most importantly, the kingdom of heaven here on earth. Most importantly, another aspect of the parable, our lives can be parables as well. Our lives can be visual vocabulary. How we live, how we love, how we hate, how we disenfranchise others, how we turn a blind eye to people, how we deny realities of suffering. These are parables as well. Visual vocabulary about our own inner faith. Are we expressing our faith by helping, or are we expressing our lack of faith by our indifference to the world? Jesus is not the only one speaking in parables. We do the same thing every day. Like the iconographers at the Greek Orthodox Church, like the mosaic workers at the Basilica, like the life of Jesus lived and expressed in parable, our lives are parables of faith as well. We are painting a picture of the way we live. Will our picture look like the ceiling of the Basilica or like the ceiling of bogies? Nothing against bogies, but they both started with B, so I had to use that one. It's up to you to decide the parable that you will live. I would encourage you to do like Jesus and create a parable that would be reflective of the kingdom of heaven. Amen.